if I were an owner, I would be invested in that, because not only does, a rising tide, raise all ships and all that, but like very truly, you are paying for somebody to do the exact same thing that somebody else just did for you a bit ago. And a lot of money, oftentimes, I'd imagine. So this is a way for you to potentially kind of save yourself capital, so that you can invest it in much more interesting things. And by interesting, I mean much more revenue generating things.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to another episode of Buildings 2.0. Today we have a special episode with Preston Smith, head of BIM Operations at Integrated Projects, my colleague. So Preston, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
When you said everything changes, you meant this particular project, or you meant like all projects?
All projects.
And that's actually what you're touching on, is kind of the discrepancy that I find, which is that discrepancy between the architectural firms just needing to complete, the contract or project, versus perhaps a kind of newfound discovery you made in the process of trying to help this project. There's actually something you might have discovered for many projects. But the problem is, made at a firm, there's kind of a short term.
Totally.
Like, we just got to deliver this one.
Yeah.
Have you found in your experience any way to kind of get out of that? I mean, I guess naturally that's probably why we see a bunch of startups just go off and break off and try to do their own thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think going back to what you were saying about architecture school and studio in general, the thing I didn't learn until I got there was, how do you make not just like a business proposal, but like a case for the thing that you want? Like, how do you make a proper business case? How do you speak so that people actually hear you? Because I was yelling at the top of my lungs, like, hey, this is going to change everything. They're like, okay, how? And I couldn't tell them. I just kind of knew it. And so what I found is I needed to speak the right language. Talk about money, talk about recurring revenue, talk about the business model that we currently have, talk about how you're going to solve X, talk about this problem and the pain point it is and why the solution is so great. I learned how to make pitch decks. I learned how to speak as an executive, right? Which is ultimately like you speak concisely and straight to the point and get to where folks are trying to go. I learned so much about how to do this. And by the time I learned all that, I realized I actually don't need to be here anymore. Like, I can do this on my own. And I realized for a lot of folks that I'd seen as they were going through these same things, they were kind of having the same realization as well. It's like, not so much that, the architecture firm was going to hold them back, or the whatever kind of firm in the AEC world was going to hold them back, but just like you weren't aligned anymore. Because the business model that makes you money makes total sense to you, and you should continue to do it. And the business model that you're trying to force on people, it just wasn't going to take. And so, ultimately, like after pitch deck after pitch deck after pitch deck, it was like, well, why am I pitching to you? Why don't I just pitch to an investor? Or why don't I just pitch myself and like try and solve this problem in a different way? So that, of course, is the story across like 6 or 7 years or something like that of learning. But it's proven by the fact that you've seen, like you said, multiple firms spin out of architecture firms. They couldn't really exist there because the two things were in conflict, which is ultimately a shame, because as I see it, architecture firms are the number one best incubator you could have for something like this. There's going to be so much feedback, and these incredible feedback loops are what you need in order to make something thrive. And the most forward-thinking, open-minded, yes and kind of people are architects. So like, why wouldn't you want to be there? But I think we're still not quite there yet.
Yeah. Have you found a discrepancy in that? So now that you're on the other side of the fence, you've now been focused on building a product. Is it fundamentally just a different process, thinking about a product versus a project?
100%. There's 2 aspects to that, maybe even 3, but projects are start, finish. Acceptance criteria is, did you complete the thing someone told you to complete? Maybe you consider whether or not it was done on time. Products are long, like problem-solving exercises. In fact, oftentimes the problem you think you're solving, by the time you get to the end, you realize you're solving a completely different problem. So things that you may have used before that didn't work to solve the previous problem, you have to decide, do you want to go solve this new problem you found? Or do you want to repurpose the problem you're actually trying to solve for now that you have this solution? And so product thinking in and of itself, like it feels, again, so architectural, so narrative driven, so on, like you have to kind of give yourself choices about what to do. And then the third thing, which is something I found most recently, like again, working with IP, is like there's this like weird little space between service and product where you're trying to solve a problem with a product. But oftentimes what I've seen is product people they move too slow sometimes, right? Because you have this space to kind of think about a lot. So, I'm going to repeat something you said to me before, which is, how do I solve this problem so I can make $1? How do I do something that someone will give me $1 for? Like, that is a very, very fast way to make that, that decision, not overthink it, not get, kind of crazy with trying to, boil the ocean. It's a really, really interesting forcing factor. If somebody will pay you for it, then it's the right thing to do. I mean, unless it's something you don't want to get paid for, of course, but
I'm curious now that, so you're at the helm of what I'm seeing is one of the fastest growing scan BIM engines. What's keeping you up?
Oof. So the most interesting thing I think about the exercise of being like at the helm of, like you said, the fastest growing scan to BIM engine is we're really global. So what's literally keeping me up are the fact that I'm coordinating with somebody in Argentina and Vietnam and South Africa, like working with a global network of folks who truly live where they live, and you have to figure that out. That actually keeps me up. So I'm up at like 6 a.m. to coordinate with folks, which is, it's not so bad because I'm a morning early. I'm an early bird. What's keeping me up in like a more metaphorical sense is what's keeping almost everybody up is automation, right? Like, how can you use this burgeoning tool, which is AI, to do everything that you want it to do to solve this problem, to increase your moat? Like, how do you do it before everybody else does it? It's made everything go so much more quick. Everything is faster now, in a way that's exciting. It puts a smile on my face. I think there's a fear-based version of this that I've seen before, and that I've even felt before, but I don't see it as much now. What ends up keeping me up is just like, oh wow, I didn't realize I could do it like this, like this sort of problem solving thing. If I just, gave ChatGPT something this to do X, Y, and Z, then I can do this, this, and this. Or now that we have this, we can try and like solve this problem in this pipeline way. So it's the power of all these like new possibilities, I guess. That's what's been waking me up at 3 a.m. and saying, I'll go back to sleep and solve it in a few hours. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have the benefit that now 10, 12, 14 years in now, you're able to kind of look back. I'm curious, what would you tell yourself back in 2012 of what you know now relative to like what you're leading, right? So you started as a CAD technician.
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself, what was it, 12 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, 2012. Yeah. 12 years ago. Jesus.
I think relative to like what you're building and like service, there's a kind of a worldwide contractor network of folks that you're leading. How would your 2012 version benefit from something that you're leading?
It's funny. I don't know that he would. I think this goes back to another question you asked, which is like, how have things changed from 12 years ago? The same problems that we have now are the same problems we had before. There's these matters of inaccurate data. There's matters of trying to use the tool right to solve. The only thing that I would maybe tell myself from 12 years ago that I know now after having like had these experiences is probably more personal. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Kind of like almost like, dad or big brother kind of stuff. Like, you'll get there. It'll be all right. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately, like, I almost feel really proud of myself. Like, I chose the right track. It's a weird thing because BIM is one of those strange spaces that, like, even in school, like there's technically a track for this called architectural technology, but I don't think I even knew anybody that took it back when I was in school. And now it's a completely different world. There's a computational design space like over at Columbia and your program and other folks. Yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, to be honest, but I would say that I was on the right track. I feel good about myself, and you did it right. Like, I don't know. That's all I would say.
For someone, just to role play for a little bit, I'm a building owner. To maybe kind of state what's going on right now. The commercial real estate industry is going through a perfect storm of a bunch of stuff from, historically high interest rates.
Yep.
Construction costs are all the way up. less demand for traditional office, more demand for housing. And the real estate industry seems to kind of be upended in many ways. I'm a building owner. I manage, say, 100 locations. Why should I even care about SCADA-BIM?
The value of a BIM isn't readily apparent for a lot of folks. So at an owner operator level, you are paying someone to produce an asset that you probably already have, that somebody produced like probably a dozen times for you. So there's the like immediate cost saving benefit of this, which is just like, hey, can I give you this thing? And then you can build upon this thing and or modify the thing. And all the things that could potentially unlock. Like, I think what most owners don't realize, what I would argue that most people in AEC don't realize, is that we are consistently cannibalizing ourselves. Like, everyone is building the exact same thing that already exists with slight tweaks. It's a very strange thing in a way, as opposed to starting on the same thing and maybe expanding on it, and whether it makes sense from a business model perspective or not, but potentially sharing it with other folks so that they could build on that and you can continue to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah.
If I were an owner, I would be invested in that, because not only does, a rising tide, raise all ships and all that, but like, very truly, you are paying for somebody to do the exact same thing that somebody else just did for you a bit ago. And a lot of money, oftentimes, I'd imagine. So this is a way for you to potentially kind of save yourself capital, so that you can invest it in much more interesting things. And by interesting, I mean much more revenue generating things.
Digital transformation as an idea is nothing new. And
No.
we've been talking about this for like the last, 10, 15 years. Digital transformation in the built environment is a very specific thing. To pose a scenario, there's a lot of buildings out there in the world. 1.6 billion buildings for, at least as of 2020. We'll assume there's a few more as of today, and likely, at least based off projections, there's going to be a lot more by 2050. What needs to be true in order for us to properly digitize buildings at scale, from your perspective?
A few things. You have to be able to move extremely quickly to understand what exists. Like that's step number one. Now, I think the other part of this is like properly defining the problem. So if as a planet, we decided the most important thing that we can do is digitize our entire world so we can understand what exists here, we have to do it by, I don't know, let's say 2030. Like, that would like ultimately galvanize folks to solve the problem together. We have no galvanizing force right now. We have there's only some folks with a mandate to kind of do this, which in this case is us. And without it, there's not really the right incentives in place for folks to do that, to digitize the entire world. So people have to kind of see for themselves, this is something worth doing. I'm going to gain value from this. And then they'll be much more inclined to do it. And then the third bit is trying to make sure that we have the tools and processes in place to actually do that. I have modeled in the past for a long time, and it can, even with Revit, which I would argue is so much better than CAD and all these various different things. I have a lot of problems with Revit, just like a good BIM manager should, in a way. But this is still one of the best tools you have. And there's even better ones, I imagine, on the way. But like, something has to be fast enough that the data transmission of your idea to this other thing, like this model, is just like fast.
Yeah.
If all three of those things are true, digitization is just like a guarantee.
What happens if we're not able to move quickly enough?
Yeah, probably a lot. Probably a lot of you know what? I'm gonna maybe make a take that doesn't benefit me, which is probably nothing. Probably will just exist in the same state that we currently exist in, which is folks will continue to pay more money than they should for buildings that they own and not know what's going on in their spaces. The architecture industry is going to continue to like not really move as quickly as it should to be able to pay itself. So like, all the things that we're seeing declines in will probably just continue to decline. But nothing, the whole world isn't going to go on fire. That nothing bad is going to happen. But it's more like, couldn't it be better? Like, wouldn't it be better if we just kind of did do this for all of us? Because we could be solving so much more interesting and honestly, like, profitable problems than the ones we're solving right now.
Yeah. I'd consider your building one of the world-class BIM teams. What would you say are some of the traits that you look for when building a team? Obviously, with kind of the threshold of understanding BIM, but like,
Yeah,
what do you look for?
it's tough. I think team building is the hardest problem I've had to solve. So I'll take a step back because I think this one might actually be like one of those long answers. I previously worked for a team out of HLW, which was a fantastic team called Next. They had three departments, and one was kind of standardization, one was digitization, like in a rendering sense, like you could produce renderings for things, and the other one was innovation, which I was in charge of, and that was around technology. And each of us had very different skill sets and interests, and collectively we had this larger team that was focused on trying to manage the way that our firm tackled using technology for digital practice. And it was for me very novel. I was like, finally, somebody's doing this thing that I've been saying we should be doing for years. It was awesome. So I've taken that experience with me here. And our team is focused on a lot of the same things. Renderings, not so much because it's not something that's important for our business, but we still have one of my favorite, some of my favorite people are on this team. One is focused on the technology side of things, so I would consider him innovative in that sense. Some of us are focused on standardization, and then the other part of our team is project management, like this operations aspect of things. Operations is something I had never thought about until I got here, and it's key to everything for a lot of reasons, which we can go into at another point. But having those three branches, like everybody's going to be good at different things. Like I'm not going to put the project manager on the coding assignment, and I'm not going to put the coder on the standardization assignment necessarily. Everybody feeds each other, and you have to be able to work as a team to collaborate on a problem and solve it, not compete on the problem to solve it. I don't believe that competition is the most effective way to solve problems. I believe collaboration is just ultimately much more effective. So the way that you work with others is one of the things I look for, beyond any interest that you might have. But yeah, having the right combination of folks that can work together to problem solve, that have enough of the interest that we need to solve the problems we have to face. Uh, that's what I'm looking at when I try and put folks together as a team.
Yeah. I mean, a headline of what you're building too is that you've built kind of a network of folks around the world
Yeah.
where, from, Argentina to India to Vietnam and everywhere in between, you figured out a way to mobilize talent around the world and connect them with real meaningful work. It's kind of hard. I mean, how do you think about that? What, in terms of sourcing talent, that's one thing, training them, supporting them, vetting them, paying them in ways that hopefully incentivizes them to grow. I mean, what are the frameworks you use to even build that?
I don't want to take too much credit for that because I feel like this is one of those cases where I was privileged enough to fall into the right frameworks already built. So I can 100% describe the frameworks that have existed that I have 1,000% taken advantage of, but I would not say that I've done anything other than potentially extend them. One of the frameworks is thinking about the business of hiring as a business, defining how much money one needs to make on a project and who could actually like live with that, which is something that I think is really, really key. Who has the right skills, scopes, as in like who can design or model MEP, for example. Like that's not an easy thing to do, or designing cabinetry, which is another not easy thing to do. Like kind of evaluating those things, and ultimately, like, can you communicate with those folks? Not in a language barrier sense, but truly, like, can you communicate? Can you problem solve together? So it comes down to the same things about collaboration. And then ultimately, managing folks at scale is everything at scale is much more interesting. Everything at scale. That's my lesson of 2024. And to do that has been extraordinary. What we've done recently is like, we treated our BIM team like a product team. Product teams think about a roadmap. You think about problems you're trying to solve. You figure out what dependencies you have. And ultimately, you try and solve very quickly, and then you produce release notes. So our release notes go out to our network. We tell the network of folks that are working with us, hey, here's what we need you to do so that we can achieve this client's goal. Here's what we're expecting you to have to work on in the future. Here's why we're doing things, because people need context. All of those things help us work collectively as a team, because imagine if you had to tell 100 people around the world something like that manually, like it just wouldn't work. You have to build the process. You have to operationalize.